Welcome, everyone, and I hope you're enjoying my quarantine accessory collection as the hair is getting out of control, and I thought I found my engineering school cap. So good afternoon, everyone. I hope everyone has grabbed their sandwich or their coffee, whatever time zone that you may be in. And I'd like to extend a warm welcome to our alumni and friends of the University of Toronto, Faculty of Applied Science and Engineering, and everyone tuning in from around the world. Today, we have alumni joining us from 9 countries, including Canada. The countries include the US, the UK, India, Japan, the UAE, Hong Kong, Germany, and Peru. Welcome, everyone. My name is Sonia DeBulio, and I'm the Director of Alumni Relations for the Faculty of Applied Science and Engineering. Thank you for joining us here today for our alumni discussion panel, COVID-19 Engineering Solutions for Our Current Crisis. Today marks the 4th alumni event held during our current situation. While we all may be acting responsibly and staying home during this COVID-19 crisis, the alumni office at the U of T Engineering is excited to still be able to provide you with engaging lectures, presentations, and discussions from our alumni and friends, our faculty during this period. We may be at home, but we're still here to ensure we create spaces to bring our engineering community together. Just a quick housekeeping item. To please send your questions to our panelists today via the group chat section. We have admin staff who are pulling together all your questions so they don't get lost and will help our moderator get through as many as possible. We also ask that you please refrain from any side conversations in the group function so we don't distract away from our panel today. So without further ado, please let me introduce David Senton. David is a professor and Tier 1 Canada Research Chair in the Department of Mechanical and Industrial Engineering at the University of Toronto. He is a recent MCERC EWR Stacey Memorial Fellow, before which he was the Interim Vice Dean of Research. He is co-founder and the CTO of Interface Fluidics, a startup focused on energy operations. He is a proud graduate from mechanical engineering here at U of T, earning both his undergrad and PhD degrees, and in addition to his Master's of Engineering degree from McGill University. Please join me in welcoming Professor David Senton. Over to you, David.
Great. Thanks, Sonia, and thanks for having me here today. It's a real honor to address our distinguished alumni always, and welcome this distinguished panel. Yeah, so let's get first to the panel here. We've got Jimmy Chu. Jimmy, can you hopefully you can turn your video on there. Actually, you might as well turn the video on for all our panel members.
How's it going, Dave?
Well, thanks. Good to see you, Jimmy. And for those of you who don't know Jimmy, he's a graduate of electrical engineering, class of 2006. And after spending the beginning of his career as a consultant for Accenture and TD, he co-founded Nanoleaf in 2012. And the company's outgrown, I think, its startup status initially. He's currently the CEO. And their primary business, and we'll get into this a little bit later on, I'd ask Jimmy about what they do. Normally, it's building smart light panels, but they have really pivoted to the COVID challenge and particularly in providing medical equipment. So we're delighted to have you here, Jimmy. Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Great. Wei, where are you, Wei?
I'm here. Can you see me?
We sure can.
Okay.
Welcome. So Wei completed his undergrad and Master's in Materials Science at U of T. In 2019, alongside U of T medicine grad Catherine Chan, he co-founded Honeybee Hub. And that's a digital solution to reduce the time and money it takes for researchers to find suitable participants for clinical trials. I mean, we've all heard of trials that had, 100 participants or 1,000, and those of us close to the research community understand that sometimes you need a lot of patients and a lot of participants to prove out something clearly. And Wei and his team at Honeybee helped make that happen by connecting the participants to the researchers. And he's really doubled down and his organization on COVID-19. So we're excited to hear about that today. And we're going to ask Wei lots of good questions.
Looking forward to it. Thanks.
Good. And speaking of questions too, don't hesitate to add some to the chat as Sonia mentioned in her intro. It'd be great to have questions from, as I realize now, around the world, right? Our alumni joining us today from around the world. Sorry for those of you who are in the middle of the night. Ananya.
Are you able to hear me now?
Yeah,
Terrific.
We got you. Welcome. Good to see you. And Ananya is a 2015 grad of industrial engineering, and that's from the Department of Mechanical and Industrial Engineering. Respect there. She's currently a senior business analyst for McKinsey and Company. And in response to this crisis, alongside fellow U of T grads and friends, she launched the Feed the Frontlines TO initiative. It's a grassroots group that's connecting frontline workers who could use a meal with restaurants that could use the business, and then the third party, which is generous folks who want to contribute to supporting both sides. So thanks, Ananya, for joining us. Great. So we'll have. I have lots of questions for these guys. They're all interesting alumni doing really interesting work. At the same time, don't hesitate to fire in questions in the chat, because it's always fun to do them in real time. And so please do participate there. Great. Who should I start with? Who wants to be the first victim?
I don't mind.
All right, let's take Wei Wei. Oh wait, no, that's not Wei Wei. That's Jimmy. Natalie. Jimmy. Tell us first about your COVID effort. I want to get into Nanoleaf and its day-to-day business, and then how that will change with COVID before and after. But tell me first about your effort, very specifically on COVID.
Sure. Okay. So I guess to give you an idea of the effort, you need a little bit of background on Nanoleaf. So Nanoleaf, we specialized in making lighting products. But after the COVID situation happened, we made the call to send our team into lockdown, just like every other company did.
Right.
And then the first thought in my mind was, people aren't going to be rushing out to buy lighting products while there's a pandemic going on, right? So our whole operational team, the whole idea was, okay, let's stop production for any new products. Let's cut down on inventory. Cash is king right now. And I don't care if people are sitting idle. We just need to conserve cash. And then, that went on for a good week. And then I was just like, well, now we're all sitting at home with nothing to do. And it was a little frustrating, right? It's just like, hey, everyone, do your part, do nothing at home. I'm just not used to that. I'm used to hey, if there's something to do, we're going to do it. Right. And then, my little brother, he's a medical doctor. One of my business partners, his sister is a nurse, and there was all this news about how there was a shortage of PPE. Meanwhile, we have operations in China, and they're like, look, there's mask factories popping up left, right, and center. So how do we connect those masks to the people that need it, like the doctors and the hospital systems in North America? So we went down that rabbit hole, and for the last, I guess close to 3 months now, we've been bringing in PPE from China, from factories in China, into Canada and the US, but primarily Canada because we have a much bigger network there. So that's kind of the high level summary of our effort.
Okay, exciting and important work. Thanks for doing it, and thanks for the description. We're going to get into some questions for you and the logistics of that. It's a complicated business, but let's go to Ananya now. Ananya, can you give us a little perspective on your COVID effort, Feed the Frontlines TO, how it started and what it does?
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess how it started is sort of an interesting story. A couple colleagues and I at McKinsey were sort of thinking through different ideas of how to support COVID efforts. I was working on a PPE effort. I saw this email come across from someone who was thinking to connect restaurants and frontline workers. And a few of us jumped right on board. And as we were exploring, we actually found that just 2 days ago, the CBC had published a story about someone who was doing something similar in New York and started a small effort in Toronto. And when we reached out, there were sort of connections all around. So it's really just a team of concerned Torontonians observing both the fact that restaurants are struggling to stay afloat with the shutdowns happening across the city, as well as at the time, a lot of high volume, so logistical challenges for frontline workers being unable to access food with a lot of cafeterias closed, or just not enough time. If you think about the amount of disinfecting that has to happen, you have to sort of take off all your equipment, go get food, put it all back on in a shortage of PPE and in a high stress situation. So the idea sort of started there, and it's really a twofer. So the idea is that donors will purchase meals for frontline workers from local restaurants. So Dave, exactly as you teed up in your intro. And we've since expanded from just frontline workers in hospitals to also social services agencies, as well as long-term care homes. And we're hoping to also be able to start addressing sort of the food insecurity crisis happening in Toronto more directly, especially as more and more people file for unemployment. The strain on programs and services like food banks is greater than ever before. And as we think about continuing to support restaurants as they open back up, still at low capacity with many staff still, restaurants still unable to employ staff, that's something additional that we're looking into now.
Great. It's exciting stuff and an important mission. Wei Wei, tell us about your COVID effort and how it got started.
Right. So I'll give you a bit of background on Honeybee first. We founded the company, my co-founder and I, last year. And then what we do is we connect, like you said, researchers to study participants for all kinds of research studies. Over the past year, we've mostly been focusing on, like, our core business has really been for academic studies. So these might be like psychology, nutrition studies, etc., that you would usually join on campus or something like that. And then as soon as COVID hit, lockdown happened, we knew that, okay, there's definitely, like, researchers are definitely going to need participants for clinical trials to find vaccines, drugs to help with the COVID effort. So as soon as COVID hit, we knew we had to do something because it's literally in our space. It's what we do. It's
right.
Just, instead of academic studies, we're going with clinical trials, which is a completely different beast, but it's something that we knew we could tackle, and we had all the right parts. Like, we know exactly where to source the data on the trials. We knew how to build it because we literally built it for our core business and everything. So all the pieces were there. We just needed to execute and go forward with it. So we launched our COVID portal in 2 weeks and helping to connect participants to researchers for trials, COVID trials.
Very cool. Okay. We've got lots of questions, but maybe we'll just sort of start back where we started there, Wei Wei. In terms of, I think about your business, it's probably an unfair comparison, but it's a little bit like Uber that matches people who want to give rides with people who need a ride, right? So you match researchers or clinical people running clinical studies, large clinical studies with active participants. And in these sorts of things, the one, I don't know much about these types of businesses, but I know network effects is a big part of it, right?
Oh, yeah.
And that's a word you guys use a lot, and it's a word that Anunia uses a lot in her COVID effort. So can you tell us all those different parts of the network, right? You've got your people who want clinical trials, they're doing clinical trials, you've got the participants. Which one is in short supply for you, or most short supply in a COVID context?
Right. So yeah, our problems regarding that is completely different for our core business and our COVID trials. So for our COVID portal, for this COVID portal, there's more than 2,000 studies, clinical trials for COVID-19, right, that require tens of millions of participants in total. It's really a large number.
Yeah.
So you can guess, the struggle is more on the participant side, definitely. And part of that reason, I think, is because we kind of have this, negative or stigma towards trial participation, I'd say. Like, we were in the cab the other day, my co-founder and I, we were in an Uber. It was a shared Uber. We were just talking to two strangers, and we were just talking about clinical trials, asking them, like, oh, would you participate in a research study? They had a really, really negative response. And I think that most people kind of have this stigma in their head about research participation. It doesn't help that there's shows like, Black Mirror, that there's that one episode with the guy who does a research study. I won't spoil it. Or like that show with Emma Stone and Jonah Hill, Maniac. There's a lot of stuff in the media that kind of portrays trials in a negative light. So I think that's also why And with this initiative, we kind of want to have it to be like a jump start, to start helping change the perception towards trials, to highlight the wins, highlight how important they are, because ultimately clinical trials are completely critical and necessary for the development of new medicines, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, I get that, and I certainly see that from my seat at the university. But I also see what you're saying with the negative perception. It can be, oh well, you're just doing that to make a few bucks and sawing off a leg or something. There's sort of these these misconceptions, right? Totally.
Maybe, et cetera.
Right.
Yeah.
As opposed to the much more accurate and noble goal of participating in science, right? And I think if I understand what you were saying, Wei, it's this moment where we're all so concerned with COVID. There's a lot more people thinking, wow, I'd really like to contribute to a trial, say, right? That they weren't thinking about that a year ago, and they never thought about that.
Yeah, exactly.
About that now. So I see what you're saying. So that side of your network for the COVID stuff is beefing up, and hopefully that will float the industry and float you in the future as well. It's great. Okay.
So I'm still left with that negative perception of clinical trials. In my mind, in order to test something, you're still the guinea pig for a new drug. So
yeah,
I understand that there's a positive side where we're trying to find the solution to COVID, but at the same time, I don't want to sign myself up to see if this thing worked or not.
Yeah,
I guess.
And I think I completely understand what you're saying. And before I started Honeybee, I probably would not participate in a clinical trial. But since then I've done a bunch of research studies at the university here. But I think where we're trying to start with is I think the first step really is education. Knowledge is power. If you really understand what is required of you in one of these trials, you really understand that there's a really, really rigorous ethics review protocol process for every single one of these trials that is completely mandatory. If we can help make more people kind of see this other side to it and make them understand that there is a lot of things that go into this that make it as safe as possible, I think that we can slowly but steadily start changing our perception towards it.
Yeah, and Jimmy, you'd feel better if you saw the mountain of paperwork that clinicians and researchers have to put through to get a trial, permission to do a trial. You wouldn't believe it. It's even a simple thing, right? We're very sensitive. And I guess I should say that we're sensitive in Canada, we're sensitive in North America. That's not always the case in every jurisdiction, that they're as sensitive as us on those issues. Wei, can you just comment on that? How many trials do you do in Canada, or do you participate in Canada? How many in the US, or how many, what's your business map look like globally?
For a COVID portal, I'd have to look it up. I'm going to say under 100 trials for COVID. Don't quote me on this, but I believe there are about under 100 trials for COVID in Canada. And there's a lot happening in China and United States and in Europe too. Right.
All good. And, just a bit of good news for you, Wei. Everyone in the chat, all our distinguished alumni, have said that they'll participate in Honeybee trials coming up this week. So that's great. Jimmy's the only skeptic. Jimmy's the only one who said no. So don't worry about it.
I will offer my leg for you guys.
Okay, topic on you now. Exactly. So tell us a bit about the day-to-day business of Nanoleaf before COVID. And you know what? Let's save that question. Let's dig in a bit to the supply chain question. You're sourcing masks in China, where you have supply chain connections and whatnot. This is more complicated than making a phone call or clicking stuff through on Alibaba and getting a freight train full of masks here. Can you give us a sense for what are the challenges in the supply chain?
Yeah, I think the challenges are pretty immense. It's not as simple as just going on Alibaba. Right now, because of the huge supply and demand difference, there's just been a lot of scam artists around. So these factories that produce, let's say, hundreds of thousands of masks per day, they won't even talk. They won't send you samples. They're just look, unless you put down $500,000 to $1 million, we're not even going to talk to you. And it's just like money up front, then we'll ship it to you. We're not going to send you samples. So that just creates a lot of room for scam artists, where it's just like, yeah, hey, I'm on Alibaba. You want to send me $1 million? I'll send you a container of masks. They take the $1 million and they disappear. And I know people that's happened to. They've just been scammed out of millions of dollars because they were in desperate need for masks.
And
then there's...
Sorry, Jimmy, just make sure that they've paid up front. They believed in a supplier, and the supplier just took their money.
Yes.
Okay, got it.
And then there's like a lot of false information around the quality of products. And this is where it gets like kind of crazy, because you would think that FDA approved products are hitting a certain level of quality, but it's actually not true. Like, we've actually tested a lot of things that were not FDA approved, but with better quality than the FDA approved ones. And then there's the supply chain of the people, like the materials that go into the masks. So there was a huge shortage of material, which caused that material cost to actually go up, which caused all the masks to go up, which then created this illusion of like people price gouging, right? And it was just like we were stuck. A lot of the times we were trying to like connect hospitals with these sources, and we're just like, look, we're not making any money from this process. Like we were doing everything just at cost. Like, we were very transparent, but sometimes like the manufacturers would be like, look, I have demand. I can only create so much. It's $5 per N95 mask. And then me and my business partners were like, do we even want to be in this? Like, you know what? Here, just you guys talk together. We could make sure that the quality is good enough. And then, hopefully we could actually ship it over, which is another can of worms, right? Just shipping, like air freight. Pilots were getting COVID-19. Pilots were forced into like 2-week lockdown every time they flew. So they wouldn't even, like, they would fly into a country, they would never leave the plane, and there would be another set of pilots that were just sleeping on the plane, just ready to fly the plane back. And the demand for air freight during COVID was insane. Yeah. Which created another room for scams. So what these freight forwarders would do is they would tell you that you're paying for air freight, but there's a lineup. And then they would secretly ship it by sea. And then 2 weeks later, they'd be like, yeah, sorry, there were delays. And then 2 weeks later, it would finally arrive because it arrived by sea freight, and they would just pocket the difference. So we had those kind of situations too. So it was the amount of hurdles that it went through during this time of a pandemic. Like, it was nowhere close to as simple as what our regular business is, which is shipping light panels around the world.
Right. Yeah. Right. It's fascinating. And I get there's a couple of key points there. One is you can deal in volume because you're operating at scale, and then also de-scamming the whole supply chain, securing it in a sense, right? As you say, the shipping was a challenge, and then the actual supplier was a challenge. And then I think it was an interesting point that you brought up there about, you're not scamming this, you're not making money on this, but you're connecting people, and sometimes you connect people who you have the sense that are, right, profiteering. And then how do you deal with that? Do you I guess you sort of have to draw a line on a price, the maximum price you'll pay for an N95, period, right? And and
we stopped dealing with N95. We just connected people like, hey, you want to get a N95 mask, get it from them. They're charging $5-6 sometimes. We just dealt with surgical masks for hospitals, but even there, like, there was always the assumption that we're profiteering from it. And actually, we were never doing that. Like, for us, it was something that, like, our team actually took pretty personally. One of the family members from our team, his parents passed away from COVID-19. So we were just like, hey, let's do what we can to actually support the effort. We don't need to make money from this. We were working with the federal government. There was the trade commissioner over in Guangzhou, China, that was actually, they were sending stuff to us to QC because we have a lab over there. We have my business partner. He's a PhD from U of T. He was actually, using lasers, doing all sorts of tests on masks, like basically just double checking the quality of all these masks before they go out. Right. Which is something that most people just can't do unless they have people on the ground.
And do you advise our audience here, like me, have been reading up on masks, and we've read different things at different times from our government and from the media. But my sense is, and you can correct me on this, but my sense is the original messaging, which was, don't use up all the N95 masks, leave them for workers. Now that's been secured. dealt with, and they're now recommending masking for us in public or in any location where we can't be 2 meters apart all the time. Is that am I so far? Is that right on policy so far?
See, so this is where, people talk about fake news all the time. People talk about like how China spreads all this propaganda, but people don't actually think about the propaganda spread in North America.
Yeah, right.
The idea that like masks were not necessary at the beginning.
Right.
That was a huge mistake. And like everyone at Nanoleaf, we knew this because we saw this happening in Asia, and we saw that everyone was wearing masks. And, as engineers, as scientists, like the logic made sense. Wearing a mask reduces the R level. If we could reduce the R level below 1, we've solved the problem. Masks were the solution to the problem.
Yeah.
But the problem is, at that time, at the very beginning of the pandemic, I wanted to do this opinion piece. We have a marketing team that's sitting around, and everyone's just talking about COVID. So I was like, look, let's just do an opinion piece. I've never actually been that passionate about everything, but the world is making a mistake here with these masks.
Yeah.
And the response that I got was, sure, you could release an opinion piece, but if you don't solve the problem of the lack of supply, you're just actually adding to the problem, which is hospitals not being able to get masks.
Right.
So are we trying to like create this message out there and be like, hey, world, you guys are a bunch of idiots? Or are you trying to actually solve the problem of, what's a long-term solution of COVID? Right. And in our opinion, it's masks. It's masks on every single face, and we're glad that the world finally came around to it. There's still a supply and demand issue. They solved that by telling everyone to wear bandanas, which is good. It's still a start.
Yeah, I'd like your take on that. So not as good as a form-fitting mask or a surgical mask. I guess is like 80% as good as that, I guess. And then where would you put my bandana? If 100% is N95, say, and then 85 is a surgical one that goes under ears, where would you put my bandana?
So we would have to run our tests, but the bandana, like if I had to guess, it's quite low, right? There's different tests that we do on surgical masks. There's the ability to like allow droplets to flow through. And of course, if you have a bandana and if you soak it with water, the water is just going to drip through. Whereas the surgical mask, it wouldn't allow you to do that, but air particles, like it'll allow you to be breathable, right? So the whole idea of like a good surgical mask is that it needs to be breathable, because if it's not breathable, then the air is just going to come in through the sides.
That's right. Sort of blast out the sides, right? Yeah, got it.
Right, but it also needs to be able to stop particles from flowing through. So what we usually did was we shined lasers to see how much light particles were actually able to come through. So there's a bunch of tests that our CTO does, but the bandana really varies by the material. And
No, I appreciate that you can't give a hard number on the bandana effectiveness. I guess, and the other thing that learning for me recently, and I just want to make sure I got this right, it's that my mask is to protect you for the most part, and your mask is to protect me. Is that, there's benefits both ways, but is that understanding correct? It's sort of a pro-social behavior for me to wear a mask. It's considerate for me to do so in public.
I think it goes both ways.
Okay. Yeah,
I think people just needed to justify their original messaging, which is you don't need a mask, but it's just creating a barrier between you and other people. It's just adding to the social distancing. Yeah, and the key metric, it just breaks. The simplest way to break it down is that it reduces the R level under 1, which means that it's no longer really a pandemic. It's something that can be contained and can be solved. Yeah. It's not going to be 0, but at least it's not going to be over 1, which is why we're in this situation to begin with.
I totally got it, and I think the alumni on the line here are masking up if they haven't already for their outings. Yeah, no, that's great, and we've got there's lots of mask discussions. I want to come back to those, and I also want to come back to Nanoleaf business as usual. But first, I want to get to Ananya, if she's over there. Tell us a bit more about her COVID effort. Ananya, are you on the line? I think we lost her. I can see her.
I am.
Hey.
Are you able to see me and hear me?
Yeah. Okay, that's good. You're in good shape. Great. So appreciate the overview you gave for us, and I bugged way about his network effects, right? Which side of who's he short on? Drivers or Uber customers? And in his case, is it trial leaders, or is it participants, you got three, right? You've got the restaurants that want business. You've got frontline workers, and then you've got donations from people who want to support this, right? So in your three-legged stool, who are you short on?
Yeah, so I think it's more that the demand outpaces supply, right? So if you think about the number of restaurants that have shut down in Toronto since COVID hit, it's actually quite exceptional. Even just in my neighborhood, anyone I talk to, I think everyone knows one or two restaurants that have shut their doors, and many of them permanently. And so when we think about we have to be very careful because there are so many restaurants that are in need, in making sure that we are selecting well and able to actually sustainably support each restaurant, because we have been expanding quite rapidly. And it's important to us that each restaurant that joins the effort is actually supported with a minimum number of orders per week, because otherwise we're not really helping sustain them. If you think about all the costs that go into a restaurant, it's everything from their rent to their ingredients to, most importantly, being able to pay their staff. And so there's kind of a series of selection that has to happen on that side. We specifically partner with kind of local independently owned restaurants. We started off in the Midtown neighborhood. We've been expanding from there with criteria, things like making sure that you have spotless dine safe ratings. You can actually adhere to our very strict food preparation, packing, delivery protocols, which have been obviously amped up with COVID, and we've gone to kind of great lengths to consult experts on that and make sure that the hospitals that we're delivering to are comfortable in terms of their health and safety protocols.
That's interesting. Yeah, I wouldn't have. Of course, you got to secure. You're now recommending this food source and recommending. It's a little bit like Jimmy's supply chain, right? You've got to make sure it was safely made and that it gets to the hospital, to the worker safely. Okay. Wow. Yeah, that's difficult.
That's exactly right. So if I think about sort of what keeps our team up at night, that is high on the list.
Yep. Well, and you'll have a problem, right? It's going to happen. But it sounds like you're taking every precaution you can. Good for you. Exactly. Okay. Sorry, I interrupted you there a little bit.
No, not at all. And so, I mean, if I think about the three-legged stool on the hospital side, there is kind of an ongoing conversation that has to be had to be able to deliver. And many hospitals have been kind of changing their protocols. The same with social service agencies, long-term care homes. So there's sort of this mutual vetting process that certainly has to occur. But the donors have been very generous. I mean, I think we've been extremely just blown away by the response of community. And we're very grassroots. So there are, relatively, when I think about the proportion of donors and the amount we've been able to raise, a relatively small proportion actually comes from businesses. We have about 1,600 individuals across Toronto who have donated everything from $10 to $20 to $100, whatever they could. And so it's been really quite exceptional on that front. But sustaining it, I mean, there is fatigue that sets in. So sustaining it across the course of COVID, which has been prolonging over time, and the need only growing. As I mentioned, I mean, the curve to some extent is sort of flattening in hospitals. And so, as I mentioned, we are looking to think about a pivot to serving individuals who have maybe recently lost their jobs or are no longer able to be supported by food banks. I was actually just reading a report the other day. 40% of food banks in Toronto have had to close because of COVID, because of lack of volunteers, canceled fundraising efforts, other such issues. So, I mean, the demand is skyrocketing at the same time as supply is dwindling, and we're hoping we can plug the gap.
Right. Yeah, that's fascinating, and that's a big challenge. And I guess your approach there would be to work with it would kind of make sense to work with the food bank network, right? Is that what you would do in that stage?
So we have been, it's an interesting question, because if you think about, we've been consulting a lot of kind of community experts in this space to try to figure out what is our exact optimal role, given the number of community organizations that already exist. And it's interesting because many folks you'll talk to will say, well, supplying food actually doesn't address the symptom. The symptom is, of course, the gap in income. So if I think about kind of everyone on this call of how to address this problem, food insecurity can be addressed kind of sort of the symptom of the problem. And there is, of course, an immediate urgent need of people struggling to put food on the table for the next meal. But there's also a bunch of work to be done around advocacy and other kind of more systemic supports to be able to get ourselves out of this crisis. And it's a much broader conversation, part of the macroeconomic picture.
Right.
In terms of where we play, of course, we are trying to continue sort of a twofer or a threefer. So we have restaurants on one hand, and more restaurants are going to need that demand. So we are in the works, and I can't say too much, but we are in the works of a few community partnerships where we are hoping to be able to provide sort of, ethnically relevant food options that are supported by local restaurants, and partner with agencies to be able to deliver that, look at folks who've been recently unemployed, how we can pull that into the effort as part of that supply chain, but then ultimately address those in need.
Yeah, no, that's great, and I think that makes sense. That's sort of, if you think of being central to your effort, this idea of connecting those most impacted, right, and having them usefully engaged and benefit from this thing to extend that. It's a challenge to extend that model, but I get it, and I think everyone in the audience gets it too. And the good news is, and I know you're speaking right now to the most generous group of alumni and wealthy group of alumni in North America. So you're in luck. So be sure, and actually that's one thing to make sure that everyone here has a sense for where they can contribute to your guys' efforts. I know my mom, I think, might be on the phone here, and I think she's cutting a check right now. I can hear that. So that's great. So do make sure that comes out. But the key tagline for people to remember you is feed the front lines, TO.
Absolutely.
Perfect. Okay, that's great. And I want to come back, and I want to, because your day job is working at McKinsey, and I know you didn't, we can't afford to hire McKinsey consultants to talk on the panel, but I do want to come back and talk to you a little bit about business as usual there and how that's changed with COVID as well. I think that'd be interesting for our alumni. So that's a question. I'll give you a minute to mull it over. I'm going to ask Jimmy a little bit about, after COVID here, your business. It's important for the economy that your business be successful. It's important for U of T engineering that our startups are successful. Can you plot a path for your current effort? What's it helping you do, or helping you learn, or helping you grow, that you're going to be able to put into business as usual Nanoleaf, or if you wish, comment on how business at Nanoleaf is going to change forever.
I think that's a pretty loaded question. There's a lot of angles to that. But I can start with, like, right after COVID happened, my first initial reaction was, let's actually tighten up spend. Let's protect the staff. In my opinion, it's just like, a company is just made up of people, and in kind of an economic chaos, the longer that we can take care of the employees, that's kind of the responsibility of the company. And I had a board meeting, and I was like, look, if we have to go bankrupt taking care of our people during this tough time, we'll do it, because it's just money, and it's like, I'd rather take care of the people first.
Jimmy,
luckily,
can I just push you a bit on that point? I totally get the sentiment there. At the same time, did your investors have a different feeling?
The good thing is that the three founders have control over the board. Okay. So the investors can't really steer that. Like we've all decided that we're always going to vote together on things.
Sure.
The idea was, hey, there's other ways to do it. Like, for example, if we were starting to get a money crunch, we could reduce everybody's salary by, like, let's say, scale it down by 25%, 50%. And that way, at least we prolong this idea. So it wasn't that let's just make stupid business decisions and go bankrupt.
Sure. Of course. Yeah.
Luckily for us, a business actually moved to just online. We have an online business. Not everyone does. Restaurants don't. So I think we were in a very good position. We had most of our sales that would have came in from, let's say, Best Buy or Apple or Home Depot, they all went to our website. We decided to completely shift gears. We actually embraced Amazon. We never embraced Amazon before. We always saw Amazon as, like, the enemy to, like, brick and mortar retail. But we embraced them. And then, so Amazon, we have the best profit margins on our own e-commerce store, and then second best on Amazon. So all of a sudden our profit margins increased, and everyone was staying at home. So they were actually flocking out to deck out their spaces. They were decking out their office. They were decking out their gamer stations, which happens to be our primary demographic.
Right.
So, I think that's been pretty positive for us. I think with COVID, the biggest change that's going to happen is just how people think about, for a company like us, like how people think about working from home versus working from the office. So I have a presentation scheduled for this Friday with my team. And it's around this topic because, it's big in the news, right? Like there's companies like Google and Facebook and Shopify. They're all talking about, hey, you know what? The future of work is going to be from home.
Yeah.
And, I question whether that's really the right decision, because there's benefits to working from home. You get to work in your PJs, you get to sleep in, you don't have to, dress up all nice, and you can take breaks and do personal things wherever you want. And for anything that you need focused work, you could actually be more efficient than at the office, potentially, if you don't have kids.
In lots of cases, for sure, yeah.
But then working from the office, you get like the social aspect. You get to read body language outside of what you see in this camera.
Right.
You don't have to you don't get the Zoom gloom. You get to build trust with your employees. Like we had years of building trust with each other, building friendships with each other, and understanding and being able to forgive people because it's like that person. You know that they didn't mean something in a bad way. And then also like career growth. Imagine a new employee comes, and we're a company with about 80 people in the company. A new person comes in. If I never meet that person in like face to face, how will I build that relationship? Understand the value that they add to the organization.
Right.
How will I loop them in on like key conversations that need input, need creativity and creative ideas? They need to kind of merge to like get better. How do you do that in a work from home environment? So I think that's going to be one of the big challenges that's going to be going forward.
Totally get it. And I've got a question come in from the audience here, and I apologize I can't get to these because you guys are too interesting to go to all the questions. But one for you, Jimmy. PPEs are classified as medical devices. Was that a wrinkle in getting in your supply chain challenges?
Oh, for sure. In Canada, they wouldn't let us import stuff until we got an MDL license. So we had to apply for that. We had to submit all sorts of certification documents in order to be able to bring it in, because our whole initiative was that we needed to get it to the hospital systems first. If the hospitals don't have PPE, then we're adding to the problem by giving it to other people. So we applied for an MDL license, we imported them, but then there was all sorts of other issues because of the media.
Sure.
The media, I'm sure you guys have all read, like, 1 million masks were faulty. They were imported from China. They never mentioned the billions of masks that were fine imported from China. Right.
Yeah.
So,
doesn't make
but yes, we did. We did get a license.
And that's part of, to us, that's part of the headache for you, but it's part of the value you bring in that, right? Because it's that much more hard for others. Anu, a question for you. I think you hinted at this, but you're focusing as much as you can on local restaurants. We're not getting frontline workers burgers from McDonald's here.
Yes, that's exactly right. And the idea being that these are the restaurants that have a harder time sort of keeping the roof over their heads, keeping their staff employed. So this really is more an effort around rebuilding the main street that we all know and love that's become under threat now with COVID-19.
Cool. And Wei, business as usual for you when that returns to Honeybee Hub. You hinted earlier, and I think it's a great point, that you hope that that COVID and everyone's interest in health and studies and the sort of front of mind will power your business and power participation in studies in general. Anything else you see as a growth opportunity from this, or things that you'll have to change in how you guys are operating when we come out of the COVID stupor here?
Right. So actually, to what you're saying, Jimmy, like you guys are thinking of like being very cash is king. You're really trying to preserve all your staff and make sure they still have a job during this time. For us, we actually doubled our staff. We went from 4 to 8 because the COVID situation actually gave us, opened us to a lot of opportunities for grants and things like that. Like we won a Origin grant, something called the Origin grant last week, and we're using those funds directly to pay for 2 undergrad students from Waterloo. And in terms of what we've been doing for our core business during this whole COVID pandemic, before we were focusing on like in-person studies in Toronto, but no one's doing that now. So we actually started getting online studies for our core business all over the world. So we have like research studies from the UK, from America, that are studying like the effects of COVID on relationships, on the society, on our well-being, through things like surveys or like face-to-face interviews. So that's kind of our pivot that we've been making during this time. And after COVID, I don't know, we'll see how it goes. I mean, you can't eliminate in-person studies. Like, they're always going to have to be conducted. But this kind of did help us expand to more online studies, not just in front, like what we were focusing on before. Yeah,
I think that's a very interesting point, and I think that is a big opportunity for you guys, and wish you good luck in it. Think about all the 10 million people you need for all the current studies that are posted. It's an interesting figure. Donald Trump is running a clinical trial of one, right? He's testing his own medicine or something that he got somebody. Did he find that through Honeybee Hub? Did you get connected? You get, no? Okay.
He can do whatever he wants, you know. If he wants to inject stuff in his blood, he
does. Yeah, for sure.
Say, go ahead.
Political endorsements are a mixed blessing sometimes anyway, so that's good. Anunya, I want to come back. We're going to have a wrap-up questions, a little bit comments for everybody to close out, but I want to just return to one thing that it's more for my personal curiosity than anything else. McKinsey, your day job, is, you know, the biggest or most prominent consulting firm worldwide. Can you give us a sense for what, maybe not McKinsey, but just in general, the sector is thinking for post-COVID or even during COVID operation? In principle, the hard challenges that bright McKinsey folks are needed for, there's lots of those around, so there should be lots of work, but the nature of that work changes. I picture you guys flying around all the time, fancy suits and luxury hotels, and working really, really, really hard on site. That's changing. Can you just talk a little bit about what you guys are thinking internally for the future of consulting?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a much broader question. If I think about McKinsey, there's offices sort of all over the world. So it's been interesting being as part of the firm, seeing how different offices all over the world are now opening in some places, not opening in others, kind of adapting. And it looks quite different for every part of the world. But I think in general, the change that's really happened is that exactly like you said, there are so many issues to now be working on as a result of Corona. And so we're investing the majority of our time in trying to be thought partners for clients to figure out, well, you know, what does come next? What does it mean to reorganize work for a distributed workforce? What does this mean for the future of sustainability and how to align economic and sustainability KPIs through businesses? How do you collaborate and enable something like inclusion while remote? And how do you as an organization sort of accelerate transitioning to what I would, to agility, this ability to very quickly reconfigure your strategy, your process, your people, your technology in response to a crisis, not just to protect your value, but then also to be able to quickly transition back to what you were doing before, which is hopefully creating value. So in terms of how the sector is changing, I mean, I think it's just that the questions are becoming more and more interconnected.
Right.
And quite interesting and provocative. So it's really a really fascinating, exciting time to be working with our clients. At the same time as recognizing, that we are at a time when we are facing our greatest challenges, and the biggest challenge of all is how to turn those into opportunities. Right. In terms of day-to-day work at the firm, certainly we are no longer traveling. Of course, employee safety is first and foremost for everyone at this time. And that does have implications for kind of like what fellow panelists were saying around how do you build those trust-based relationships? How do you actually influence an organization to act in a way that's distributed? And so that's been interesting. I mean, I think the most fascinating thing to me about COVID and ways of working is that we've probably accelerated the remote work transition a decade.
Right. That's it. Yeah.
And so
it's been a masterclass in change management, hasn't it?
Exactly. So this idea of returning to the normal is not really applicable. I think we're now transitioning into very much a new normal.
Right. Well, thanks for that. And U of T now owes McKinsey about $17,000, I guess, for that. But thanks for the input. No, it's great. Really appreciate all of the perspectives on the panel today. Any last comments, folks? We've got great questions coming in. One from an alumnus here, Farhang, who was a past student of mine, who's dear to my heart. And he's asking, and you can decide to bring this into your closing comments. We've got a few minutes left, but get a magic wand. Farhang asked, what products or services would you have created to address the COVID situation overnight? So what would you have had maybe 2 months ago?
I would have invested in Zoom.
Jimmy, you're very fortunate that my wife's not tuning in, because I did, but then I got spooked and I sold. I still made a bit of money, but I didn't make it's still been a stress on our marriage, the fact that I sold. My wife only lets me play with $17 in my trading account anyway, so it was not a big danger. But yeah, investing in Zoom is a good idea, and also. Maybe I'll channel your earlier wisdom, Jimmy, and just say clarity from the media and our policymakers that, when in doubt, defer to the truth, right, on the value of masks. That's great. And Jimmy, I think the advancement will be following up with you, because I think we need U of T engineering school themed masks. And that's something I haven't seen. Have people taken advantage of the advertising opportunity of everyone's face?
That's actually pretty brilliant. I never thought about it until now.
That's a good idea. Yeah, that's a great idea.
Let's do it.
You know what? We got honeybee stickers. I'm wearing a honeybee. Can't go down too much because I'm not wearing pants, but we have honeybee masks. That'd be great.
Wait, I'll be in trouble if I ask too many more questions. But any last comments from you? Love your honeybee effort there. Any comments for our audience? Stuff you want us to remember? Stuff you're thinking about?
If you are like, you can take a look at our website. If full clinical trial thing turns you off and it's a little bit too far, I completely get that. We also have our main portal where researchers all around the world are actually studying, could use your help for their COVID-related surveys, and you can help drive science forward in terms of understanding how COVID is affecting us. If that is of any interest to anybody here.
Yeah, no, that's great. And I think it's important to get that message out there and now's the right time to do it, that trials are how this stuff gets done. And that's how science moves forward. So thanks for your work in that way. And then any last comments from you?
Yes. Oh, there we go. Yes, I think what comes to mind more than anything is how inspiring it's been to see how community is able to come together and how we're able to think through solutions that are able to benefit kind of multiple fronts of society, right? And so in our case, that is local restaurants, frontline workers, individuals in need. But I think the parting thought that I would have here is twofold. One, in the immediate term, to the extent that folks can, to really be looking for opportunities. I think there is fatigue that is setting in. It seems like we are doing better and better, but really, if I think about the economic repercussions and other consequences of the crisis, that is only just beginning, and it's only going to deepen over time. And so there is a need for us to remain engaged and to remain creative and agile and think about long-term sustainable contribution. That's in the immediate term, maybe let's say the next few months. But if I think longer than that, I think what's been really powerful about the pandemic is that it has brought a lot of these solutions to light. And these are problems that didn't just become prominent because of the pandemic. Food insecurity has been around for a long time. There are so many pockets that I think we can take from this pandemic forward. So I would just encourage us all to be continuing to think about that and not wait until a crisis to be innovative.
Yeah, I appreciate that, and appreciate all the great input today from this panel and all the work you're doing. So thank you. And on behalf of our alumni, thank you. Sonia.
And I will jump in and just say, Ananya, I couldn't agree with you more of how our community, I've been so inspired to see how the world has come together, but I'm equally inspired, if not more, because it's closer to my heart, how our alumni, how our faculty, how our students have come together and have pivoted and to give back to our community. So Wei, Jimmy, Ananya, and all your colleagues that you work with, thank you for what you do. Thank you for your inspiration, and thank you for giving back. And David, thank you so much for being an amazing moderator as always. You may recognize him. He's been our now we call Disruptors and Dilemmas moderator, formerly Biz School moderator. Thank you, David. So coincidentally, today would have been the kickoff to our U of T alumni reunion on campus today. I'm so sad. I miss seeing everyone. This is like my favorite time of year. This evening would have been the young alumni kickoff at the rec room. It's just another reason why we're so thankful to have showcased today the amazing work being done in our alumni community, in particular, these 3 young alumni who are making changes to help us get through this crisis. So thank you. Until we're able to gather again, rest assured that the Alumni Office will continue to bring you more virtual opportunities to come together. And also look for opportunities to give back through volunteer opportunities that we are posting online on Connect. Finally, I want to thank each and every one of the members of our alumni community and guests that's signed in today, and for being a vital part of our U of T engineering community and giving back in this way and supporting us. And with that, on behalf of the Alumni Office and the Faculty of Applied Science and Engineering and the Quarantine Accessory Quarantine Accessory group here, I hereby adjourn today's discussion. Whether you're near or far, we're so thankful that you were able to join us. We wish you a happy and safe day. All the best, everyone. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.